Hi there. So this is the third attempt, I think, of me trying to talk about integrities here for a second. Because recently the living ideas have talked about that, and it was a good and very interesting conversation I had. And quite a number of integrities were talked about, beginning with 4 kinds of integrities that we find identified by synergetics, and then people taking that also and applying it to other spheres of life, like social spheres and whatnot. And I think integrities are such an essential sphere of our generalized principles that, give rise to universe as we know it, and as we are it, as we member it. Such an essential member of, or part of that, not part, such an essential aspect of reality, that we do find them present in all layers of life, And I thought I'd offer a couple of, so to speak, hands-on observations from the spheres themselves to give more of a sense of how we can recognize these integrities when they are at play. And I do have a few of these structures here with me to give us a good sense of that and show us different aspects of this. And as we have this here, this little 4 eyes sphere, we can perhaps begin just by naming the 4 integrities that I want to speak about, because it's a good enough place to start. Now, the 4 that I want to talk about are the integrity of the whole, the integrity of tension, which is tensecrity, which is also the reason why the camera is so bouncy, because we're both in a tensecrity right now. Integrity of the whole, integrity of tension, then integrity of pattern, and lastly integrity of the individual. Alright? Whole, tension, pattern, and individual. Alright, mind you, this is a case out of many where synergetics offers us a concept of, or a comprehension, a thought form for unity that is inherently plural, because that is something we find time and again. Unity is plural, and at minimum 2. And the first of these 4 that are really one, it's not one above the other, or we could think, this one is on top, it's the unity of the whole, and if that isn't there, the others don't. Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I would say they're all mutually arising, and we won't find one without the other, although it is possible, by the virtue of the variety of these integrities, to actually manufacture artificial realities in which the levels of integrity are pushed to their limits, to where we can barely even notice them, and they're just so able to hold on to something that we then consider to be reality. Now, the integrity of the whole is a good place to start, because wholeness is something that is everywhere, within, around, and without us. It's something that shows how we can't even begin to think about the whole in terms of parts, right? And none of us is a part of anything. Like, I'm not a part of nature. I am nature. Because I've grown from it, and I embody it, and I am living it as well. Because nature is just another word for universe. It's just a kind of word that has already creeping in our branching of nature and culture, thinking that there's the nature that we find in universe, and then we have the human nature. And all of these things, they're pointing at something, and I do have that something with me too, to point out how we are actively ignoring the integrities of the universe, and thereby straining every member of this enormous omni-accommodating membership that is universe in the process, while we wouldn't have to, which is the good news. Alright, so the integrity of the whole is also in its own an expression of the complementarity of two that become one, or that are one, as yin and yang, as all of these pairs of mutual arising. In this case, it is the inside and outside of everybody. Because this here is not only a conglomerate of 4 wooden beads with a string tying them together, it is also a body of space-time. It is actually the simplemost kind of sphere, and all space-time is spherical. And what gives rise to its being a body that is more than just the assemblage of the bodies that make it up is the fact that it has a membrane, which is perhaps more clear if I take this model here, which is the same structure. It's just that here we have the big beads as the spheres, whereas in this case we have these rubber bands around these vertices or vortices that make up centers of spheres also. These spheres are happenings, as all spheres are happenings, and as a happening, it's, the wholeness of everybody is not just actually the membrane, which we have here, but it's also the presence of a center of gravity of that whole body. And this center of gravity in this case is a little hard to take hold of. I do have stuff to help with that, but we're not there. But this system has this membrane as defined by the eyes here between the triangles, or between the spheres that make up triangles, where we can look through into this. I would like the light to be better for this. Yeah, something like that. We can look in there, and these lines outside also define a membrane, and actually there's a third layer of that on the inside of this, where there's tiny triangles. So this is actually 3 layers of membrane. But what they do share is that they are a boundary binding inside to outside, which makes up the whole, which is the whole. And this is true for the simplemost bodies as it is for everybody else, including you and I. So we are boundaries, at minimum boundaries, with a center of gravity that bind our inside, which is all the organs and the tiny microorganisms and the fascia and the skeleton and all these systems that we are integrating into our being, into our unity as plural. And the integrity of that with our outside makes us whole, right? And I guess that is a good place to say a word about the individual, right? Because individual means something akin to atom. It's something that we cannot divide. It's indivisible. And as such, everybody is indivisible, because we cannot separate them out of the whole, right? We cannot cut somebody out of universe, because there's no place else, and we can't take out a piece of universe and just have it disappear into nothingness. Even though we can turn somebody in universe inside out, or other ways transform them and create something new or different or distinct from that. But all of us, all of universe is really one big atom, one big individual also. It's that wholeness, which is also present in every one of us, right? So every one of us is an indivisible whole self of universe. And as such, we have a couple of choices and virtues that come by being this integrity of one body, one shape, one sensorium, one being of universe, as every single one of us is a confluence of the whole thing, and we all have different perspectives, points of views, insights, outsides, ideas, dreams, visions, thoughts, realities that we experience. And all of them are, as the inside and outside of this, they go together, without having a hierarchy, without one being more important than the other, or weighing more, Alright, because there is no interdependence, no dependence in the system. It's a compendence. We're hanging together. Woo! And there it moves. Hanging together, dancing together, compending. Okay, so that's a couple of thoughts on the integrity of the whole as presenced by inside and outside of the boundary membrane of every system and its center of gravity. Besides that, we also have the integrity of tensegrity. And that is really what we find here with this web, this net of lines that hold these 4 spheres together, right? They're drawn as close together as they can be. Closest drawn spheres, and all of the structures that I'm playing with are these kinds of tensecrities or tensional integrities. So something like this has all its integrity, all its beingness, because of the completeness of the tension that is running through this whole system, binding it all together, spellbinding. And yet, just as with the other thing, if I pull on it, the whole thing moves as one. Here is another kind of tensecrity, one that perhaps looks a little more wild, I don't know. This is really something that I would like you to try making, because I thought this is a set of materials that, you know, are probably readily available to a lot of people, and this is not to say that it is the only way by far, but it's a simple way. And here we have just 6 such chopsticks and 4 rubber bands in these vertices. And these provide the tensional integrity, the tensecrity, because without them, this thing is actually moving, right? It's well, actually with them, even with them, it's moving. It's just moving as one. And all its members are holding one another in place actively. That is a special kind of quality of the tensecrity, because in our conventional ways of doing things, people are also using tensecrity. Like right next to me here is a brickstone building, and those bricks they exist because of tensecrity, but in that case on a molecular level, because the crystalline structure of the clay and sand and these ingredients to those bricks before they got burned allowed those molecules to collect in these kinds of structures and then crystallize in that place and then be baked so that they would remain in there. And now it's a stone, you know, and maybe it's another bit of it is a mountain somewhere, because we haven't turned it into a stone yet, or, you know, it hasn't gone through the churnings of the ocean. But it's all the same kind of quality that we find in our bodies within fascia system, for instance. So where our shape doesn't come from the skeleton, because if it was just that, we would be a pile of stones sitting somewhere. It's actually that our skeleton is held within the web of the fascia, which is also a web that is weaving in, out, and around all other organs of our body. It is the very organ of shape, and it is, similarly to these structures that I'm creating, a tensecrity, a network of tension. We find the same in, you know, quantum mechanics and nuclear physics, and all the way up to astronomical scales, where we're talking about the integrity of gravity, which is also a tensecrity, because it is something that is going around everything, embracing the whole. You know, there's lots of tensecrities that we are intimately familiar with without knowing that they are such. For instance, yeah, let's look at that as the next thing, because one more integrity is super good to know about. And that is the integrity of pattern integrity. And that is something we also find everywhere we look. But it also speaks of that bifurcation very clearly that I spoke to earlier, that branching off that we did, where we abstracted ourselves, our what we call human nature, away from the way that the rest of the river of universe is going. Because we have decided, for whatever reasons, that our concept, our idea, our model of the reality of bodies that we experience and inhabit has to be this abstraction, this notion of a space without time in it, which has the shape of a box, a cube, per definition. Not because of any other reason than definition, really. However, if I create this kind of tensegrity model here and make it into the shape of what is supposed to be a cube, supposedly, it cannot hold that shape. That's weird, when everything in our manufactured reality is actually coming in that shape. Boxes upon boxes and boxes within boxes. And what we see there with the ubiquity, is that a word? I don't know. The omnipresence of cubes in the world of domesticated humans, humanimals. What we find there is a pattern integrity of its own, because it's all boxes, they all fit together. One has a square paper and it fits into every other one of these normal arrangements. However, it is at odds with the larger, deeper integrities that it is created from and within, because universe itself does present us with shapes that look like squares and rectangles, but whenever they come up, they are really something inherently dynamic and moving. They are the embodiment of movement in a way. So they are not the static, lifeless abstraction that we make them out to be. And I can show you that, because this here, again, that cube, supposed, you can see how the squares can't hold their squareness there. When I hold it like so, it may still look like a cube to you, because you've been conditioned to perhaps read this shape as a box. But it's a hex, and as such it's actually foldable, like so. Like it's a half hex now, and it's a pair of eyes, and it's one eye. We can also have it be 4 eyes. We can, you know, that unit I spoke to earlier, here it is. We can turn it also into a pair of 4 eyes, like so. Now it's 2 of those. And we can take it and with its help get a hold of the center of gravity of our 4 eyes here. There we go. Well, it cannot really hold the shape of the cube just as such, though. I can make that happen. I do have one here that can be whole. But before we do that, let's see if we cannot turn this into a whole of its own, into something that has integrity and all these other kinds of integrities that we spoke to, including, I suppose, structural integrity, which it's a funny thing, because It speaks of a world where that isn't given, to name it, right? Really everything in universe has structural integrity because everybody in universe is omni-triangulated, and the triangle is structure. And that is what I will do now with this model. I will just put this button on the end of this that fingertip, into this corner of an eye here, and do the same a few more times. And by doing that, I'm creating triangles instead of squares. Here we go. Here's half of an 8 eyes already. And you can see how this is moving still, because between the triangles there seems to be a square. But the square is actually just a void, a gap between the triangles, so that is what allows them to move. Yeah. And only by, again, omni-triangulation can we allow this system to be whole, to behold the whole, because now, still folding and changing as it is, albeit much more defined in shape, it is the last connection here that synergizes the whole of it, the 8 eyes that I have in my hands now, that can really hold a lot of weight that the box wasn't even able to hold its own. And this is embodying integrity of inside and outside and the center of gravity. It is embodying the integrity of the individual, because I have chosen to bind it this way rather than the box that couldn't hold its shape. And as such, this is a memory of the integrity of my choice to go with this frame rather than another. It is also embodying pattern integrity, because this is following along the very patterns that space-time is embodying all around us and within us. Omni-triangulation, spherical closest drawn spheres, and all these beautiful organisms of, a many-eyed reality that is many-formed as well. And it is an attentional integrity, because this is also just straws, paper straws with little wooden dowels in them, on string, on line that is running through them. So that is why it is moving, and it was moving all along, and it is still moving. It's just moving all as one. There you go. And it is still spheres drawn together, because it would be this shape here. 3 spheres sitting on 3. And there's a lot of room in it, and all of that. That is one way of, another way of embodying and comprehending these principles of integrity. And in the meantime it begins raining, as you may have noticed. And I think I'm going to show one more example of pattern integrity as we have it here, rather than going on into more. There is so much more, this we can continue this conversation on any number of threads, and particularly the notion of how the integration of all of these things allows a system to unfold in synergy that is truly unforeseeable until we create it. Because, well, any nested system of wholes that is a whole in its own has its own whole lot of qualities that we wouldn't find in any of its members if we separated or divided them out, cut them apart. Okay, so while the rain keeps falling, just that one notion on the pattern. Hey, so Yesterday, as I was doing this video, I got cut off by the video camera, by the phone, whatever, and I was just about to finish off by showing a last thought about pattern integrity. And upon reviewing the video that I did yesterday, I realized that I had unconsciously prepared the prop in the proper way, in the perfect way to show the very thing that I wanted to speak to with regards to pattern integrity, because I spoke already to how there's a pattern integrity insofar as we see that all structure is triangle, and there's a lot to play with that. There's another kind of pattern integrity where we find people who have learned about boxes, doing boxes and boxes and boxes because they fit together in their own corner of the universe. And another example would be in the handedness of molecules of the organic life. The biological life forms on Earth, for instance, all live in some relation to sugar, and all the sugar molecules produced or generated by life are, I think, right-handed, turning when the same stuff, if we mix together its components in the lab, turns out half right-turned and half left-turned, or right-handed and left-handed. So there seems to be no deep difference between the two. Sometimes these chiral molecules do behave differently, but in this case it doesn't seem to matter too much, but it shows how universe, in that branch that turned into our biological kin on this kinship Earth, has chosen in the beginning, probably as always, one direction to turn into, and it stuck with that, or it didn't stick, but it kept to that, right? Out of that, it is very unlikely to find an organism that would suddenly create its own being in a mirrorverse where everything is spun left way. And yet here we are with the boxes, you know. But anyways, here is a good example of that left-handed and right-handedness, because this structure that I showed you already is really a weave, right? It's the same kind of weave that I'm sitting on right now, where you can see it's a triagonal, triaxial, trihexagonal weave, and every time the ropes that I'm sitting on are passing by one another, they move over one and under one. However, I broke the pattern integrity in this one yesterday when I took one corner off to show that it was moving. I put it back on, but I had turned the corner the other way, and I can show you what that turned this out to. Let's see. This eye here is well woven. So this is coming from under here. No, it's actually not well woven. Let me see which one is. There should be at least one that's fine. Perhaps not. Perhaps not, because I turned one corner, so none of them should be. But this one is. So this one comes from under here and goes over here. This one goes under here and over here, and this one goes under here and over there. So this is an eye with pattern integrity in its weave. And I would think that all three of these corners are turning the same way. So if I hold this towards the camera, we can see if it's more like my left or my right hand, and I would say it's more like my left hand here, like these fingers rather than these. It's too dark. Okay. Right. It's pointing the other way, more like this. Yes, like this. And this corner is doing the same. And so is this. However, the one that I'm holding onto here is turning the other way. It's not turning this way, but that. So this one is out of balance, so to speak. It's turned, it's returned, it's reversed the direction. And even though there's other ways I could break this pattern, I could cross two and have the third go over them. I didn't even do that. It's just really turning one corner the other way. And because of that, because of this, it is this one, I think. Yep. Because this one turns the other way, look what happened to the eyes next to it. This should go under here and over here and over here, but it's under. It's under. And then this one is over here and over here. So on 3 out of the 4 eyes, I've broken the pattern. It's not a weave in that way anymore. And while the overall structure is still a 4 eyes and therefore still very stable and strong and has its own kinds of integrities, one of the integrities is somewhat how could I say that? It's diminished a little. It's reduced in its full potential. And to make that repair that situation, we can just turn this corner the other way. So we open this up, and I do hope I'm picking a proper one now. I don't think so. Hold on. Before I undo this, let me see. That's that one, this one. Yeah, I think this one. So you saw me in the video yesterday fiddling with this, or in the same video, it's this bit in the last part. And I undid this corner, and it was like this, or it was the other way, it was like that, and I turned it over. And you see, now it's broken. This is not the right, the proper path. How about that? That looks good. Now we have a triangle between the 3. And is it turning the proper way? It's under there, over there, under there, over there. Yeah, this is it. Okay, so now this is turning the same way as the other corners, where it was turning inversed before. Oops. So now this is the same direction as the others, and because of that, all of the weave of all the eyes is now going well. This is over here, under there, over here, under there, over here, under there, and all the way around. And now it has the full pattern integrity, so it is now at ease in every way, because every time it interacts with another, the interaction can be taken up by the whole without any obstructions. And therefore this is as strong as it can be. And these little things, they don't necessarily mean the world, because if I triangulate a system, whether the corner is this way or that way isn't the most important bit. It's still going to be a structure and stable. It's just to allow the whole potential integrity to unfold. It's wise to mind these things. And as a last thought on that, I do think this is also true for the direction in which space-time as such is unfolding, right? If we look at the solar system from what we would call the top, So from, I guess, the direction from the solar plane, the plane of the planets around the Earth, Sun, which is mostly like this, let's say, let's horizontalize that, and where our North Pole is pointing, let's say that is the direction that we look at the solar system, and it's turning perhaps this way around, right? If we look from the other side, it's gonna turn the other way around, but if we stick with one point of view, it's turning one kind of way, and that is the way that we turn around the Sun, and the way we turn around the Earth, and you know, the days turn out to be, and everything is going one way. Everything is turning, as such. Everything's turning its way, and that can change. You know, like some planets are really quite out of that plane, for instance, and they're still turning. But I think just as life chose one direction to have the molecules handedness somewhere in the beginning, when it began weaving in that way, in the same way, at some point space-time just took a turn and began turning, if there was such a moment. And it could have just as well turned the other way, and nothing would be different other than the point of view would be from the from the opposite end. We would still be growing outwards and regenerating and returning in such a way. Alright, that's it. So much on integrity for now. Take care, and I see you soon. Bye bye.